time over to Jay.
Yeah, by the way, I guess I should do housekeeping. There's a bathroom right there in the hall, and there's a bathroom in the corner, okay? And there's also one downstairs.
So if you all need to go at once, you're taken care of. You're safe. Thanks, Ed and Kristen, again for opening your home to everybody that's here and everybody that's virtually there on Zoom. Appreciate it very much. It's good to see you.
I don't know whose home it's in.
Somebody. So if you're on, will you please mute? Just start out muted. Our Zoom folks, so we can't hear you. Thank you. Anyway, we're delighted to have Carolyn here. I call her a national treasure. Actually, international treasure. You're an international treasure.
Oh, wow, when did that happen?
Just, I made it happen just now.
Excellent. I'll accept that.
So we're just so delighted that you're here. And then Carolyn will be speaking again tomorrow at Restore. Is it Friday or Saturday? It is tomorrow.
Friday church tomorrow, yes.
Tomorrow. So if you're familiar with that big conference going on down at the Salt Palace from the Faith Matters folks, that's a fun thing. And so she'll also be there. And she's just a little nervous about 1,500 people.
Nope.
So let's see. One other thing. Oh, and thanks. Yeah, I did thank Ed and Kristen. So I was asked less than a week ago to put on one more Faith Again for this Sunday. So there's at the same time right now going on, George Hanley brought Carolyn to me, bless his heart, his good soul, and he was on his way to Logan because there's a big Book of Mormon conference, an International Book of Mormon conference. So there's two speakers there, Reverend Dr. Fatima Sella and Margaret Olson Hemming. Now I've had Fatima before during about 2 years ago when Black Lives Matter and all that was really hot. I had her talk about those issues coming from her perspective. You can probably guess her color with her name, maybe that's racist to say it that way. I don't mean it that way, but she speaks from experience. And they wrote a book about Book of Mormon for the least of these. And now they've just finished their second one and it's out. And so they'll be talking about that Sunday evening, thanks to Ed and Kristen's generosity here again. They made their space available very quickly. So that's this coming Sunday at 7:30. So you're welcome to also come to that.
Jay, we're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Thank
you, Bob. I'll speak up better. That's a problem I have. Well, I'll just talk more loudly. It's good practice for me. Should I try this? I just don't want any bad feedback. Is that any better, Bob? I've got technical assistance here. Thank you from Carolyn's granddaughter. Anyway, thank you for, tell me anytime I'm speaking too quiet. That happens a lot. So I don't know how many of you have had a chance to read Carolyn's book. It's just delightful. I mean, it hasn't been out long, so you may not have. I do have a lovely podcast by the Faith Matters folks, Tim and Aubrey, that came out just about a week ago with Carolyn about her book. So you can also enjoy that. And I highly recommend the book. You can get it on Kindle, or she's got some here, which is help the Zoom group. But anyway, you're welcome to buy that here from Carolyn afterwards. And I'm sure you'll sign it.
Indeed, I will sign it.
Does it cost extra, or you just can sign it for free?
As a special to you.
Okay, so free. Okay, so I wanted to start out. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Got to get to the first of my book of her. Hold on here. She tells a joke. Leave my home this morning. Thanks. I'll just talk loud. See if I can get back to the beginning of Kindle here. She maybe you remember the joke. Do you remember the joke you tell in the first part of the book?
Yeah.
Why don't you start out telling a joke? That's always, I mean, last time you came, you actually started with a joke. Do you remember that?
I'm going to start with a different joke.
Okay, I'm fine. You
Okay.
tell any joke you want.
Do I have to hold this the
No.
whole time?
Let's see if you people can hear.
Well, I'm
on
sure
Zoom in there.
people can hear me. It's those people that you're concerned about.
True.
So.
Can you hear
how do
Carolyn? Okay,
how do
people
you
on Zoom.
determine?
Bob, Reese, can you hear?
Oh, Bob Reese, are you on there?
He is.
Hi, my dear Bob.
Lots of people are saying, hey, Bob.
He said I can hear fine.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think for both of you, just speaking a little bit louder would be helpful. So,
Okay, we'll do our best. Thank you. You holler if we're not doing it loud enough. Thanks, Bob. Okay.
Okay, here is a joke that is not in the book,
Cool.
although I do tell two pretty good jokes in the book. Can you hear me, Bob?
pretty well.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm gonna have you tell your joke.
Should that be closer? I mean,
Yeah.
for
Is the
both,
You were-
is the microphone volume
as
set up?
long as I have to see myself.
Okay, yeah. I see you in living
you
color
can- I
detail
would
there.
rather,
That's great.
okay.
Is that better? So I'm gonna have you tell the joke, and then I almost forgot, we have a musical number that Kristen and Lorene we're gonna do.
Well,
And then we'll
okay
have an
then.
opening prayer, but I'm getting ahead of myself. But tell your joke and then we'll go on to that.
Okay. And truly, it is always easier to speak to a group once you have heard them laugh. And I happen to be extraordinarily nervous about a number of things right now, so. Now, here we go. All right. So here's this man who's on his deathbed. And he's just lying there. And suddenly he smells this wonderful aroma wafting into the room. And he says, oh, that's my favorite cookies. My wife is making my favorite cookies for the very last time. Oh, so he's so excited. He rolls off the bed and he crawls out of his room and he crawls down the hall and he makes his way into the kitchen and he's smelling this wonderful aroma and he gets to the counter and he just reaches up. Oh, and there's those plate of cookies. He reaches up and just grabs one and just as he does, here's this big thwack on his fingers and the voice, don't touch those, they're for the funeral.
Kind of got a bit of stand-up.
That is
Thank
a
you,
very-
Canadian.
That is a very good one. Thank you. Okay, let's hear music.
Yes, these two are wonderful musicians.
This is a hymn written by Fred Boros,
Ooh, good hymn writer.
What God Calls Us to. To see the world through others' eyes, be slow to judge or criticize, but leave the rest to God alone, and never cast another stone. Just show His love in all we do. This is what God calls us to. Okay. To give the hungry clothe the poor, to help the sick receive a cure, to stand as champions of the weak and share our bounty with the needy, to serve the many, not the few. This is what God calls us to. Renouncing war, proclaiming peace, that profiting from death might cease, and chant consoling unafraid, in pastures that the Lord has made. Surrender grudges, start anew. This is what God calls us to. To lay our treasures up above, investing every day in love, and not in things that have no life, and all too often bring us strife. To live as Christ would have us do. This is what God calls us to. This is what God calls us to.
Thank you, and thanks, Richard, for having the presence of mind to turn that around. Appreciate it.
And to turn it off.
So I've asked James Johnson to give us an opening blessing.
I think Karen will.
Oh, good. I did ask Karen first.
And,
This is kind of an interfaith thing, so that's why I asked her first, so I'm fine with either
I
one.
had a feeling that's why you asked me, and I'm not quite used to this, so I'm just going to speak from the heart.
That's perfect. That is perfect. Thank you, Karen. This is Karen Salas.
Yes, it's very special to be in this group with the people gathered here and over Zoom, in the presence of all the hearts and spirits and experiences. I want to express gratitude and the invitation for us all to acknowledge our many paths that brought us here, our wisdom, our joy, our hardship, and the commitments that bring us here and take us forward, and that we may open our hearts and minds and our bodies to the wisdom and the inspiration that we will receive here tonight.
Beautiful. Amen. Thank you. As my granddaughter would say at the end of her prayer, which is just a gratitude prayer. Amen. And then sometimes a hallelujah. And her parents are atheists, so it's kind of. All right. You're on. Completely, fully. It's all you. No pressure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, wow. It is good to be with all of you. It is. And so I will now calm myself down from all of the nonsense that I had to go through with the technicalities. Om. And I'm glad we have various people here who are not of the LDS persuasion. How many of you have read the brand new little book? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's fine.
It is very brand new.
Yes, it is a fine book. Now, I'm going to make you all really jealous when I tell you that this lovely young lady, my granddaughter, got the distinct pleasure of having me read the book aloud to her over the phone. You will, when I tell you this story, you will just be so sorry that you don't have the best granddaughter in the entire world, because I do. Because this lovely young lady for years has made an arrangement that she wants to call me on the phone every Monday evening. We don't call it family home evening. And we just talk and visit and laugh and giggle and have the best time. And then she decided she wanted me to read all of my books to her over the phone. We haven't gotten to all of them, but we've read about 5, haven't we? Yeah.
You should be recording them if you're not.
And then I sing her a lullaby. once in a while I get her to sing me a lullaby. And then we end our phone conversation. I mean, are you all not jealous of that? Oh my gosh. Besides that, how cute is she?
Adorable.
And she's moving to New York next week,
Oh, why?
at least for a year, just to,
Congratulations. Thank you.
For adventure.
and she has a bachelor's degree from the University of Utah,
I have two, actually.
two bachelors in English and sociology. Anyway, enough about her. Let's talk about me. Oh, gee, I love this little book so much. I really, I can't tell you the fun I had in writing it. I have had less fun since I finished writing it because I self-published it and I have to do all of that kind of work that it is not up my alley. But nevertheless, the joy I had in writing this book, I just cannot express. Now, Jay thought you would like to know the background of where in the world I got the idea for writing this. Anybody who knows my writing history, I've handled, a number of interesting subjects, many of them within the philosophical, historical confines of the LDS Church, in which I have very deep roots. I have a grandmother, not a great, but a grandmother who walked across the plains when she was 8 years old. I have a grandfather who was in the Mormon, great grandfather in the Mormon battalion. Another great, or maybe two greats on this one, grandfather who came over on the ship Brooklyn, arrived in San Francisco. And so I am genetically on overload with Mormon history. And I have very deep roots in it. And I participate in the church, and I am very grateful for the church, and I have not been excommunicated from the church, in spite of the fact that I have really pushed the boundaries in a lot of significant ways. This guy over here, Jay, he popped up in one of my books. I didn't know that. How many here know about my book, The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy? It is really one of my most important things. And I sent out a survey for people anonymously to take this survey on their feelings about the eternal polygamy that is in Mormon doctrine and the inequality in the sealing practices. And to my amazement, we had, by the time we finished the 4 weeks, we had over 8,000 people who had responded. And two of them were Jay and his wife. Of course, I didn't know that. And the stories were all anonymous, so I would never know who. But Jay had a very compelling story. And so I used his story. And he even had his real name in it, at least his first name.
It's actually Jane. I mentioned her. So,
Yeah. So anyway, a few years ago, Jane accosted me down at a musical event in Spring City, Utah, saying, "I'm in your book. I'm in your polygamy book." So that's how I got to know Jay and Jane. So those of you, I don't know how you could identify that story. Oh, it's on page 100.
Yeah.
It's on page 100. And you very interesting folk who do not belong to this odd community that we're talking about here. If you would like to learn more about this odd and wonderful community, this is a book that shows some of the wonderfulness and a lot of the oddness. Well, enough about that. So I have written a lot of poetry and some plays and a whole bunch of different things. My recent book just before this is a book of poems called Finding Mother God, believing as I do that we need to invite God the Mother back into our consciousness, which is the subject that I'm addressing at this gigantic and terrifying conference tomorrow in the Salt Palace, where there will be 1,500 people for 2 days. But about this book, I've been working on this for really about 20 years in terms of thinking it through and trying it this way, trying it the other way, and none of them worked. But why in the world would a nice Mormon girl want to write about this highly non-Mormon subject anyway, that ties into somebody else's faith tradition? Much of this is based on what we know as the chakra system. And the fact of the matter is that my very dear queer husband, those of you who don't know my history will wonder why I'm calling him that. But everybody who knows my history knows that I was married to a very dear gay man. He would not mind at all that I would call him my dear queer husband. So anyway, he, I believe, was, while we were still living in Utah, I think he would have been one of the first in Utah to discover the New Age. And he got us into meditation. And he could not get enough of studying consciousness. And I had already been very, very aware and studying paranormal kinds of things. And so I was very interested in alternative spiritual kinds of activity. So when I sort of personally discovered the chakra system, and I had not been as devoted to it as so many people who have their yoga teachers and they cleanse their chakras and all of this. But I just found it the most fascinating step-by-step spiritual journey that immediately just grabbed my attention. And the very thick first book that I read about this was Wheels of Life by Anadea Judith, whom I later met. And in fact, she came to my home just last month and we had a really good visit. She's very well known. And I have an endorsement from her on the back of this book. But it was from her book that I realized, and she pointed out, that the chakra system that we, of course, identify with the points in our bodies, that it also covers the history of the human race from primitive times up to hopefully the most highly enlightened times that we are still trying to get to. And as I kind of studied that system, looking at the history of the world, I thought, wow, that's sort of the history of the personal development of the individual. But this is also really useful to look at human relations, to look at how we relate to each other, especially in this intimate love relationship. And so I was just captivated by that and began to look at the whole system through those eyes. And it was so compelling to me that I thought, and I really hadn't read anything that took that particular slant with it. There may very well be other things, but I'm still not aware of them. So I just began to think really excitedly and creatively in, could I write a book that utilized this concept, because it's so useful. Because so many relationships are just flip-flopping around, not knowing where they're going, not knowing. And I thought, ooh, if I could do that, it would be really useful. So I tried this and I tried that, and I did not feel good about it. But just a couple of years ago, I said, I can't just put this in the file and let it just stay there. Be one of the things after I'm dead that somebody has to catalog. Unpublished manuscripts. So I decided to devote myself again to it, and I jumped back in, and it was still a hard thing for me until, see, my time at BYU, and I loved my time at BYU, and I was in the drama department, and I had some wonderful opportunities to be in plays. So, dialogue came very easily to me. And some of the plays that I wrote, dialogue was, I felt really firmly strong in that. So as soon as I got the idea, let this just be a monologue. Let this be a story that is told in first person by this young woman who is experiencing it. And as soon as I got that idea, I thought, I can do that. I know I can do that. And I know I will love doing it. And how many of you did listen to the Faith Matters podcast? Okay, most of you have, well, several, but most of you have not. But this is what I told them, that I wanted, first of all, to, and I want to read to you the first couple of paragraphs, because as soon as I sat down and wrote these paragraphs in the first person, I knew who she was, and I knew that I could like her a lot, and I knew she could be ridiculous at the same time, but I knew she could be the traveler and the voice that would tell my story. So this is what I just suddenly wrote one day. Chapter 1, The Map Maker. You may think that what I'm about to tell you was just a very bright dream, or that it came from the anti-anxiety medication they gave me at the hospital after tending to my cuts from the bomb that went off in the cafe. And of course I have considered that. But what you have to understand is that this event happened in a reality that is truer than the brushing your teeth reality. And I am profoundly certain that the stones of the west wall of the Temple Mount were real, and even more certain that she was real, and that what she told me is true. Last night was my first night home, and I planned to sleep late, but early I was awakened by words. The urgency is intense, and I feel like I am a runner commissioned to bear a message to the king, a vital message that tells how to stop the war, and the war must stop because there is too much pain and too much loss. You will have to forgive me as I deliver the message, for I stumble as I run, and I stumble as I write. I was in Jerusalem because my boss at Google sent me there. And actually, I was relieved to be there because I didn't want to spend my third wedding anniversary with my husband, Daniel, due to the fact that I did not have much love left. So I thought, I can do this. I loved writing that. And so I just jumped in and kept writing. And I want to, I don't want to just read you, well, maybe I will just read you bits and pieces from here and there to kind of develop where we're going with this. I'm not going to read you the end because, I mean, the story is a good one, and you nobody wants to just read to you the end before you get there. So I will leave a little bit of suspense. Of course, you know it. will end well. I mean, why would I write the love map, saving your love relationship and incidentally saving the world? And by the way, everything falls apart.
Jokes on you.
Pardon me?
I just did the jokes on you.
Right. Okay, so up to this point, does anybody have a question? That, yes,
Is it a novel?
yes, well, it is a novelette.
Okay.
I call it a story. And on the back, I say, this story is fiction and it is true. So yes, this is a story.
Is it based on a real person?
No,
Could be.
just one of my alter egos. Yeah,
That's what most authors do.
yeah. Anything else? Well, did that story interest you? Did those paragraphs
Yeah, absolutely.
interest you a little bit? Oh, okay. So here's a little bit of what's going on now. Joanna is my woman. And she quickly tells her a little bit about how she got into Google, and she majored in Semitic languages. She speaks fluent Hebrew and Arabic. So she is hired by her boss at Google, and they develop kind of a good friendship. And she gives just a little quick thing about she fell in love and she just thought it was the greatest thing in the world. The happy ever after lasted for, close to a year. Then ever so slowly, that glorious sense of well-being began to fade. Halfway through our third year, I saw a meme on the internet, an artsy photo of an old broken down rusted farm wagon out in the rain. And the words said, "The wagon of love breaks under the burden of life." I sat there for a long time staring at it, and then staring at it longer through tears. Is this how it happens? One sad thing that doesn't weigh very much, a couple of angry things that are a bit heavier, a box of resentments shoved in very full. Then the wood starts to creak and something splits, and your husband hardly ever plays his guitar anymore. Why do Daniel's habits that used to make me giggle no longer seem charming? When did the balled up stinky sock on the bedroom floor stop meaning this was worn by start to mean, how come it doesn't care as much as I care about keeping our love nest tidy? Well, we go on and on. A lot of little slights and disagreements and growing tensions and occasionally bigger conflicts. All these things put together, put safely in the sadness bank to just sit there and enjoy the miracle of compounding interest, started to add it up quite a bit. The edge was taken off my joy, and then the center was invaded. My thoughts, those sweet and life-giving thoughts that had flooded my first waking moments and lifted me through the day. I am in love and I am loved and I am so sorry for everyone who is not me. Those thoughts were out of reach. Plus, I'd stopped telling him jokes, even the really good ones. And we get a few little glimpses of some of their arguments. Joanna, you talk too much. Talk too much. Talk too much. That's what you used to love about me. You said you could listen to me for hours, that I was just so very interesting. You could listen to me for hours. Hours of you telling me what I was doing wrong. Are you finished? No, I am not finished. How come I am the only one who lights the love candle? How come I'm the only one who ever buys oils or anything to make the bedroom nice? How come you stopped buying that sandalwood aftershave you know I love? Some things are worth investing in, you know, maybe worth more than even opening up an IRA, or maybe you don't know. And so we get a glimpse of what's happening with them. And Joanna's boss at Google calls her in for a meeting. And she wonders if she's done something wrong, but no, she's been getting very, very good reviews. But he has an assignment for her. He wants to send her to Jerusalem for a couple of weeks, just to do person-to-person research on how to solve the gigantic problem they have over there about how to map the borders and please the Palestinians and please the Israelis, which is not a possible thing to do. But he's in the research department, and he says, if you will just go over for 2 weeks and just interview people on the street, ask them how we could create a win-win about the mapping thing, I'll put that as part of our research. So she's thrilled, and she runs home and asks her, tells her husband they get to go on this great trip, and he says, no, we can't. We don't have the money. Well, I have my per diem, and they got a room for me. All we need is your plane ticket. Of course we have the money in the bank. No, we don't have the money in the bank. We have the money in the IRA. And they'd been arguing about that. Her wanting to put all their money toward their student loans, him wanting to start an IRA. And all of a sudden she learns that without her agreement, he has taken the $4,000 out of their checking account and opened an IRA. And she, of course, is beyond furious. But nevertheless, she says, well, we'll take the money out of the IRA. I can't, substantial penalty. And then they argue more. We made a solemn agreement. We would put nothing on the credit card that could not pay off until at the end of the month, except for, I waited, except for emergencies. I jumped up, emergencies. Daniel, this is an emergency. Can you not smell the smoke? Something is on fire. Something is going up in flames, and it's us. It's our marriage. It's that priceless thing we found when we fell in love. Let's just take a week and just go to care for each other and have a glorious time. Silence, pen still tapping on the mouse pad. Have you no words? You don't want to fight for us? You would rather just sit here at your computer? And you decided to put the money in an IRA on your own without really discussing. You know what, Joanna? You don't really discuss things. You debate things, and you're very good at it, and you're always right. That's a terrible thing to say, Daniel. Sometimes I don't even know who you are. The pen flew across the room, and Daniel flew out of his chair. Well, I'm not who you think I am, Joanna. I'm not the perfectly trained puppy you'd like to live with. I'm not the perfect guy to have a perfect conversation with about a stupid art film. I'm not the guy who knows how to buy the perfect gift so you don't have to return it. I will never care about a beautiful garnish on a plate, and I might never notice the beard trimmings in the sink. And the reason I spend so much time in this room is because this is the only place in the house I can relax for one frickin' minute without somebody looking over my shoulder to see if I'm doing it right. Who am I, Joanna? Not the guy you keep hoping I am. And maybe I'm not the guy you want to spend the rest of your life with either. So Joanna gets on the plane by herself. And the next chapter is called Lost in the Holy Land. And she's just sitting there. She cannot believe what's happened. I ordered apple juice and then closed my eyes. Dear God, help me. Dear God, help me. Dear God, help me. The word surprised me, for I was not in the habit of talking to God. I had prayed and prayed for my father's recovery, and that was not a successful venture. Still, the words were there. Dear God, help me. So she arrives there. She's having a good time back in her. She had visited and spent time in Jerusalem. She wanted to show him her kibbutz. I lived on a kibbutz for 6 months when I was young. Studied Hebrew, worked on the land. This is all I can remember. Sitting at the back wall in the crowded and happy cafe, studying the menu, smell of fresh pita bread and spicy lamb sausage, a wedding party, bride taking off shoes, groom lifting goblet for a toast, and then a bursting sound too loud and violent to be real, screams, glass breaking, pieces of chairs flying, my head hitting the wall, curled up on the floor, more screams, sirens, someone in uniform lifting me. Take her, there's blood. I can walk. No, here on a stretcher, blanket over me, inside an ambulance. Dear God, help me. Sirens again, antiseptic life and death smell of a hospital, squeak of shoes on tile. Dear God, help me. And she's taken care of at the hospital and tells them that, and she has a small concussion. They want to keep her, but she says, no, I'd get a better sleep in my hotel room. So she goes back to her hotel. And now we find chapter 5, titled The Vision. I heard her before I saw her. You asked for help? I pulled the covers closer around me. I knew I had put the do not disturb sign on the outside doorknob. No, I mumbled, please, no, go. You said you were lost. I lifted my sleep mask and glanced at the clock, 1:11. Then burrowed more deeply into the warmth of the white comforter. You did ask for help, you know. I threw off the sleep mask, rose up on one elbow and stared. Someone standing about 10 feet away, like in a spotlight, only the light was in her and not on her. You did say, God help me. I gazed more intently, then spoke through a sleepy haze. You are God? A chime of laughter. Of course I'm not God. Well, perhaps a gust of God, a breath of God. Breath and spirit are the same word in Hebrew, but you know that. A slight fragrance of rose. I felt for the bedstand and turned on the lamp. Wild dream. Then I remembered the bomb. Is this like a near-death experience? Another laugh. Get up, you have work to do. So Joanna gets up and she meets her higher self, someone who looks exactly like her, only larger and brighter and smarter. Are you me? The mirror image spoke. I am yourself with a capital S. You are, I am the larger self, the higher self, the self that remembers. I am the self that closes the distance between you and God, or you and source, all that is, universal mind, whatever words you like. But let's stick with God, that's easiest. And if you add one more O, you get good, which I like a lot, and which was forgotten by many who wrote stories of a God who is not very godly, which is an impossibility because God cannot be no good. And no, Joanna, that ain't no double negative. You even talk like me. Again, the laughter. No, sweetie, you talk like me. Higher self? She was sounding like some of those people Oprah interviews about soul stuff. And I found them kind of fascinating, but this was different. This personage was right here in front of me in this hotel room and talking directly to me. It's like this. The image put out her hands and drew between us the thick and shining lines of an inverted pyramid. This wide space up here that incomprehensibly goes on and out forever, let's call it God. And now watch how the focus narrows and narrows downwards so it becomes very particular, very focused, very limited in human, a very condensed point of you. Oh, I could go on reading so long. I've got to summarize some of this.
Hey,
So
Karen,
so they meet.
Question.
Yes.
One, I did hear one line book and I loved it. It's rated as a textbook. She says, but I'm not religious.
Yeah,
Why don't you
I love-
read that? Because
I
I was
love
gonna
that.
bring that up.
I love
Caroline,
that,
for
that
that
phrase.
section. But I don't know if
let's
it's the
see,
same
it
on
is-
Kindle
is
as it
that-
is in the book. Because right before it, there's some good things that you said.
It was such a great line.
It is a great line.
I just sent it to her.
And it's worth discussing within our context of our faith.
Yeah,
It
okay.
tends to be very narrow and too specific. In my mind.
Another observation too, Carolyn,
yes,
if you haven't created an audible version of this,
Right.
I
you
did.
should.
I made it. I know.
Okay,
It's not
because
quite
you're a
it's
very
not quite
talented
up yet.
She is.
narrator,
Theater major gal.
Yes.
so
very compelling.
it is. It's-
Now,
it's
I don't
better- it's
know
Better than when I read.
I
That's
don't
for
know
sure.
if God's not religious either. I think that's just a little bit later.
Yeah.
I think. But I will keep reading this little bit that you. This she narrows down to this little point here. Up here is the universal God that goes on forever, and right down here is tiny little you. Cleverly, you are okay. Her hand danced in the empty space above me. But look at the rest of you, Joanna. And never again believe that there's a place where you leave off and God begins. Never believe that you are apart from God. You are a part of God, deliberately and cleverly focused into what we call you. Well, okay, we could take a moment for that. See, I have always been taught that I am apart from God. I have been sent away on this journey, and it's my job to work so hard and be so good that I can make my way back to God. In the meantime, there is God hoping that I'll get good enough to make my way back to God, but I am apart from God. And long ago, before I wrote this, I thought, that's not the right linguistics. We're never apart from God. We are a part of God, no matter what.
Well said. So this religious part, not religious, it's just a few pages. coming up.
Okay,
It's where she talks about the vision. Am I having a vision? Aren't I like all those stories in the Bible?
yeah. So here, where we still are, and Sylvia is the name that Joanna gives to her higher self. And they greet Joanna. Listen carefully, Sylvia said. You come here on a quest. A quest is never easy, but the one you have chosen is the most important, the most challenging quest that exists. A hero's journey, if ever there was one. You asked, what is love, real love? If I find it, how can I keep it? Like God, love is huge, which makes sense because God is love. And love also narrows to the particular. In your story to Joanna and Daniel. Joanna, do you love Daniel? I spoke without hesitation. Yes. And you feel that love slipping away? Tears as I spoke. Yes. What are you ready to do to save it? To help it live and grow always? Anything. I heard this myself speak this mountainous word, and it frightened me, for I knew I spoke the truth, but I also knew I was inviting a climb for which I was not ready. Hearing my thoughts, Sylvia smiled. Of course you are ready. You have been preparing, let us say, forever. And climb is a good word, a better word than you know, which is why you are wearing your hiking boots. And then now, so here we introduce this antagonist who is Joanna's ego. I don't want to get too far into it right now, but she comes by from time to time, wreaking havoc and terror. And who is that? Every quest requires an antagonist, Joanna, and this one will demand all you have. Are you willing to go? I remembered something my father had said about new and challenging territory being the reason we're here in the first place. Cowards contribute nothing, and we owe everything to those who dare. Hesitantly now, I am willing to go. Now, the next chapter, there is a map. And we find them suddenly transported from there up onto the Temple Mount. And Joanna says, I'm having a vision, aren't I? Like all those stories in the Bible. Indeed. And yes, this land is saturated with visions. They're in the cracks of the walls and the sound of the prayers. Ezekiel saw the valley of dry bones. Jacob saw the ladder to heaven. Mary Magdalene saw the risen Jesus. Mohammed saw Archangel Gabriel. The shepherds on the hill saw the angels that brought the good tidings of great joy and of peace on earth. Why should you not be gifted with a vision? But I'm not very religious, hardly at all. And neither is God. Sylvia's happy laugh rang out. Visions come to all sorts of people. And she tells how scientists, musicians, sculptors have had visions of what they were to do before they even set about to do them. Enough philosophizing, Joanna. We are wasting time, but more importantly, we are wasting love, and love is a terrible thing to waste. Love brought you here, brought you to wandering in the desert, chanting, which way, which way? And Sylvia goes on, the most important of all maps. Oh wait, she says, I heard you say you wanted to be a map maker. Listen carefully. The most important of all maps is already made, the map to the promised land of love. It is your calling to find it, to follow it, and to share it. I stared at her incredulously. And it's here? Here in the Holy Land? Hiding in some cave like the Dead Sea Scrolls? Is in a land even more holy than the one on which we stand, dear one. It is. Sylvia placed a hand over my heart. Here. I raised a hand and placed it over hers. Inside of me? And then the one with the sword comes through again, raising some havoc. She hoped you would never know about the map, because if you find the map, she is destroyed.
Can we pause for a second and just kind of talk about, again, the vision she had, and this idea that God resides within us in Revelation can come through all kinds of sources. That in this tradition, we that as an idea, but we don't live it. It seems to me, particularly from the higher up. And how can we expand that? And, I'm sure that's not unique to our tradition. Brian McLaren's going to be talking at this conference from a whole different, religious tradition, and he had the same problem. He got ostracized and kicked out of his church for questioning, for having a bigger vision. So part of my question is, how can we individually help people feel more comfortable? Because a lot of people aren't comfortable with that idea. More traditional people in our faith tradition. It's like it has to come from Deseret Book, or it has to come from the Catholic Church.
I know this is not good Mormon doctrine. I fight for it.
Essentially, it is from the core. Our doctrine.
Yeah, but you see, this
is
just a story. So I don't think anyone's going to throw me out for just telling a story, though I am braiding some kind of interesting theology in here. And see, when I'm not calling this vision that she's having, and see, you can just say, oh, she's having this hallucination. I leave all kinds of doors open for you to explain away, what she's having here, but I do call it a vision. And we are all taught that we, of course, in our tradition, we are to communicate with the Holy Ghost to give us special information. Get our, pray to the Father and all of that. And yet we're open to the idea that, you know, like as I think it was Abraham Lincoln who first said, you know, we have our, oh, what, our good angel and our bad angel. How was that put? You know what I'm talking about. So let's just pretend that what I'm saying here, that she's listening to her better self. And I call it here her higher self. And I really don't think that anybody could get too upset about that, because all of us operate often from our lower frequency self. And then all of us usually come back to who we really are and speak from our better self. So I'm just suggesting that people understand that while I'm putting this in specifically metaphysical terms, that this is Joanna's higher self, her better self, that she's talking to here.
Just to address Jay's question of how do we tell our friends and neighbors, or how do we be examples of this? And there's obviously a beautiful part in the book that we've already incorporated. It's like, what would love do? What would love do? And I think
What would love do now?
What would love do now? And now is important, because
It is.
because we're individuals who are seemingly not famous or powerful for the most part, but we still have family members, we have neighbors, we have friends, we have backyard neighbors, and because of ego dynamics, it's easy to think, well, he's being mean to me, so am I going to be mean back, or am I going to find something more snide to say? Or if I do ask myself the question, what would love do now? And to me, it seems like the answer to your question is to be, like Gandhi said, be the love you want to see now. Be that now. And so it's in our own personal, small interactions that never will be probably written in a history book. I don't know who said this, maybe someone knows, that great men are really made by small acts that are really insignificant. That's the most important thing that a great person does, is like many small acts of kindness and love and patience. And women.
Sure, of course. And see, there is nothing in this book that you could not find really in the teachings of Jesus. Jesus was very clear. Love your enemy. Do good to them that hate you. Forgive everybody. This is nothing brand new. And you'll find me referencing Jesus here, referencing all of the great spiritual leaders who all taught the same thing. And the difference here is that we have an interesting, simple map that shows us our development and where we get stuck and just how to get unstuck. That's the only kind of unusual thing I'm framing this to offer it as.
I'm intrigued with this the third person, the ego person, and stripping yourself of ego, you know. And you said you weren't going to address that. Can you just address it a little bit?
Oh, well,
You
yeah.
could read a part that's really good. I think you explained it simply and well.
Right. We'll see. We're going to be here till midnight. So, and I
You'll have
gotta
to read the book,
be in some kind of form tomorrow to give this talk to 1,500 people. But no, okay, it is her ego that she doesn't understand is her ego. But this woman on a horse, on a black horse with a sword, comes from time to time, frightening her and being so dangerous. And Joanna finally is told by, well, she's who is she? Well, she's the one who is trying to keep you from finding the treasure, from finding what it is that you are after here, from finding love. Well, who is she? She's a part of, we learn as gradually as we go along. She's a part of you. She's what, my ego or something? She's your ego, exactly. And as we interact with this idea from time to time, we ultimately learn that this ego can be a friend, because the ego is what makes us different from other people. It personalizes us. Ego is not a bad thing. We each need it. But once the ego takes up a sword, it is not our friend.
It just occurred to me that the ego, to be in dialogue with our own ego, is what gives us the choice to say, wait, do I want to do that? Or do I want to do something better? So that dialogue is what helps us clarify that there's a better choice possible.
Okay, well,
You've got about 20 minutes. Because we're trying to get you out of here.
we have 20 minutes
Well, we
left.
stop at 9 usually.
Look, well, we can go a bit longer, but okay, look, we really have to get going here. So, Joanna is told the steps are 7, and here she is given the map that she needs. That, and that she's shown a vision of like the Vitruvian Man, and I'm just wanted to read these. That this map that we'll call the love map is in her body.
These are the built on the chakras, right?
Yeah. I use the word chakras 3 times, but then I use the word kingdoms because they feel a little better to me. What you never knew, Joanna, is the most important map of all. It's not a horizontal one, a vertical one. There are these 7 points of light, sacred places where body and spirit connect, each of a higher vibration, the one below. First, at the base of the spine, it governs instinct, safety, survival. Think I have. And this one had lit up a dark blood red. The second, this rich orange located in the reproductive organs, governs sexuality, emotion, creativity, self-esteem. I feel. The third, a yellow sun in the abdomen, governs power, action, individual will. I can. The fourth, this lush green in the heart, governs compassion, forgiveness, generosity. It is the midway point, the meeting place of earth and heaven. I love. The fifth, blue in the throat, governs communication, pronounces the future. I speak. The sixth, indigo in the forehead or the third eye, governs spiritual vision. I see. The final wheel became a gleaming violet, shot with highlights of white. Seventh, at the crown of the head, governs pure knowledge, revelation. I know. I studied the brilliant shining map before me. And now Joanna learned, and Joanna asks, where am I? Where am I on this journey? You're right here between the third and the fourth kingdom, between power and love. I'm stuck in the third, I said. Sylvia nodded. As is civilization. You and most people operate from the fourth, from the heart often, but have not yet moved in as full citizens. The passage from the third into the fourth, the heart, is the most difficult of all, like the narrow gateway in Jerusalem called the Eye of the Needle. But you are called, and if you succeed in that move, you will save your love, your relationship with Daniel, and I will save, like it or not, Joanna. And she tells her that Joanna is called to save the world, because there is a tipping point. And we know the scientifically there is a tipping point when enough action happens that all of a sudden it just everything just spills over, and there's something brand new happens. And what if Joanna is the tipping point? If she can save her love with Daniel, maybe hers is the one that could make the tipping point and save the world. So that is the journey that now she goes on. And so she's told we have to now visit each of these kingdoms one by one and get to know them. So we go through a chapter of the first the first kingdom of civilization in its first primal state of pure survival. We see that happening. And then we see how that same energy happened in her and her husband's first kingdom attraction of making a tribe together, not alone. Find somebody. And we see them as they first meet. And that is their very first experience with each other, of needing someone to be with, not alone. And then we move up to the second kingdom, and we see a beautiful chapter on Crete, where sexuality was highly reverenced. And I think this is done with a great deal of taste. Of the sexual relationship should be a joyous one. And we see similarly the attraction, the sexual attraction that happens as Joanna and Daniel truly fall in love and see each other just purely through the eyes of love. And now we move into the third kingdom.
I just have a question. So for those, and you're kind of in this category ever since your husband passed away, that don't have some for years. So you're kind of in this situation, have been for years, as a lot of people are, that don't have that person. I mean, that situation that you're creating a story around. So how does it encompass?
Hey, most of the world does not have a true love going on in their life.
Right. You're talking about even married, right? Even people that do have a partner, because that's what I'm talking about.
Sure.
People that have a life partner, a committed relationship that you're pointing to in that book.
Can't you go through those kingdoms with all your associations?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was asked on the podcast of the Faith Matters, but somebody who was never married. And I make it clear in here that this journey is not just for those in a romantic love relationship. That is the one I have chosen for this story. And that might be the most efficient because it is so intimate and brings you up against so many things. But these are the steps we take with everybody. These are the steps we take
With children, with grandchildren.
with our children, with our grandchildren. These are the steps you take with your business people, like it or not. If you're going to live in my will over your will, or we won't call it love maybe, but let's call it win-win, or something that is higher than the third of my will over yours.
Thank you.
So moving right along, we see it's in the third kingdom that the world created so many things. You know, the technological revolution, all of these things that came from this can-do sort of thing of building stuff, making stuff happen. And she has a beautiful journey in here that I won't take the time to get into. But then we see that same third kingdom in the relationship of Joanna and Daniel. When their first step into that was when they decide to marry, because that requires, that puts them on a new frontier. A frontier where they have to build something together. And so we see them in their goodness of building great things together, and then in their conflict. of power and will and my will over your will. And then we have a section specifically on the one with the sword and how Joanna realizes that that is her. She is the one who gives energy to this one that we call the one with the sword,
The ego.
when the ego. Yeah,
Do you know where the place is where she becomes friends with you? I mean, that's a beautiful section where
Yeah,
there's such a
that's-
confrontation there.
I'll read some more toward the end.
Because that's a really,
Yeah.
because loving oneself is a theme that's very powerful in that book.
Right.
That I think is one of the most
It-
important
it-
things. So,
The thing that is holding Joanna back from moving up to the fourth, we meet this here in chapter 15 called the Museum of Pain, where we are in this storage room where all of her and Daniel's stuff is all stored, but then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we see that it's a storage room of all her resentments. She has each of her resentments on a pedestal with a light flashing on it, and a card that says,
it's a,
these,
it's a cool picture.
these are
You describe it, you illustrate it really well. I love it.
yeah. Here, okay. So here is the one with the sword sitting on a Chiquita banana box that has been transformed, or all, she's there, and lots of Chiquita banana boxes have been transformed into shining glass cases or gleaming wooden pedestals, professionally lit with pedestals. Within the glass cases were more objects meticulously arranged. You wouldn't believe, Joanna, Sylvia says, what she's done without in order to maintain this place. I read the placard written in excellent calligraphy and propped on a miniature silver easel in front of the object on the nearest pedestal. Dirty socks Daniel always leaves on the bedroom floor. I put out a finger and lifted a soiled white stocking, then dropped it back on the little velvet maroon platform to join its soiled mate. This, I said in disbelief, this deserves a pedestal and a placard? She thinks so. This place is precious to her, Joanna. Sylvia swept her arms in a grand gesture. Behold the museum of the one with the sword. She spends a great deal of time here. I stepped to the next pedestal. Half-eaten dish of ice cream Daniel left again. I sat last Sunday night on the arm of sofa. And the next one, a little brown potted pile of that Joanna could barely see. Beard trimmings and nail clippings. Daniel insists on leaving in the bathroom sink, although Joanna has told him a gazillion times not to. And the next one, terrible, terrible things Daniel said to Joanna. This exhibit was a talking head inside a protected glass case. A head that looked like a good clay rendition of Daniel. A bright red arrow pointed to a button. I hesitated, then pressed it. Oh, yeah, you like this one. A scratchy male voice sounding very much like Daniel spoke rapidly and at a higher pitch than normal. You could probably lose the 5 pounds if you gave up the Pringles. Joanna, you talk too much. And maybe I'm not the guy you want to spend the rest of your life with either. And maybe I'm not the guy. Quickly, I pressed the button again and the voice slowed and dropped and stalled. The next pedestal was empty and the placard read in especially excellent calligraphy, theater subscription Daniel said he would buy. I stepped to the next one and read out loud. Very dumb card Daniel gave for Joanna for her trip. Well, boy, she's quick, isn't she? She lets nothing slip by, Joanna, ever. Oh, how she loves her museum. I made my way to the prominent pedestal. $4,000 check Daniel wrote to open the IRA. I stared at the little piece of paper with the imprint of Bank of America and Daniel's signature. He should never have done that, I said quietly. He should not have done that all on his own. Movement in the shadows. And then she sees the one with the sword sitting on her Chiquita banana box and repeats. And she repeated, he should never have done that. Should never have done that all on his own. I whirled and confronted Sylvia, but he did all those things, and those things are not okay. It's not like I'm the only bad guy here, you know. You're right, my sweet, she said. He did them, and they are not okay. You are right. And now you have the choice to be right or to be happy and to grow. You have the choice to worship the painful past or to create the future by finding a new way to live in the present. You have the choice to be damned in the third or to move upward into the fourth. How? My cry seemed to bounce from wall to wall. The answer to that question must come from a higher place than this one. Shall we enter the fourth kingdom? I can? I can move into the fourth now? Not moving, Joanna. You are not ready yet. You can go there now as a guest. You've journeyed there often. So has civilization. But you've never chosen to relocate there as a committed citizen. And you know, when you make the move, yes, I make the move forever. I can't bear this. I need air, please. Air, a good sign. I put my hands over my heart and closed my eyes. And now we have our visit to the fourth, where Joanna is just there as a visitor. And she found herself swimming in joy. I wasn't just feeling, I was being loved. This is your natural habitat, Joanna. You were created of love, created to be loved. This is the fourth kingdom, the midway point between the 7 energy centers, the meeting place of heaven and earth, of matter and spirit. It's that on the map of your body, it is the heart, and this element is air. This is the ventilating place where the lungs are, the nourishing place where the breasts are. This the giving place from which the arms and hands extend to do, to lift, to bless. The heart is an alchemist, taking everything base and turning it into love. Then I saw things and people, and Joanna sees this panorama of the beautiful things that have happened in the world. And then in her relationship with Daniel, all in the fourth, in the kingdom of love. And we see little glimpses here. That same man who has said, love your enemies, now on a cross and wearing a crown of thorns speaks, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. A woman sees a family run from the men wearing swastika armbands and hides them in her attic, sharing her meager portions of food. There's a whole list of beautiful things that humanity has created in the fourth kingdom. And then I want to be part of that, I cried out to Sylvia. But you are, she replied, of course you are. Daniel is too. Everything you've done that comes from the heart is lasting, has helped to build the fourth kingdom. Would you like to see one of your best moments? I nodded. What I wondered was, what remarkable act was I about to witness? Slowly a room appeared, a couch, 2 people sitting on it, Daniel and Joanna. He was reading out loud, it seemed. She was rubbing lotion on the bare feet that rested in her lap. That's it? That's one of our great moments? That's nothing. Nothing. 2 people are giving huge gifts. Daniel is reading to you poems by Emily Dickinson, though he would never choose the book for himself. Yes, that was very sweet. And you are giving Daniel a foot rub. He loves foot rubs, even though you hate feet. I do. I have a foot fetish in reverse. I can't stand feet. And yet there you are. And there he is, happily doing for the other precisely what the other would love. Sweet, you say? Powerful, Joanna. Extraordinary. I stepped closer to the holographic image before me. Love spilling out of the hearts, through the voice, through the hands, and then something even more amazing. That odd experience I had when I first looked at Sylvia. All that light that was shining not on her, but in her. That's what I was seeing now, only multiplied as I looked at my husband. He was more beautiful than I had ever seen him. more beautiful than I had ever seen anyone. The brightness within shot out from every cell. His eyes, those little blue worlds that had amazed me. I saw now that each was a hologram of the universe, deep and unending and holy. This is the gift of the fourth, Joanna. When you see someone through the eyes of love, you are seeing them through the eyes of God. This is how God sees Daniel every moment of every day for all of eternity, even when he does a very bad job of cleaning the stove. I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my throat. And would you like to see how God sees you? Oh, the thought of falling in love with myself had never crossed my mind, but it was happening. This woman who was me became equally luminous, equally beautiful, breathtakingly beautiful. This is how God sees me. Sylvia nodded. Even when I'm stupid and bitchy and complain and criticize, always. I wanted to keep this vision forever, but then it happened. A shock of fear and a tremor under my feet. I'm losing this, Sylvia, I was shouting now. This is slipping away. I can't bear it. What can I do? A loud wind was drowning out my words, but I heard Sylvia reply, ask yourself always only one question. Something was sucking me downward. What question? What question? Sylvia held me tight and whispered clearly, what would love do now? Always and only, what would love do now? Then a roaring sound and something beneath a split, a chasm and the fall. And now we have the showdown.
John, I think it's a good plan. I think we need to leave the showdown. I think we ought to just leave because it's really powerful. If you tell, I mean, you've almost read the whole book. I want to buy the book. That's a good place to end, and we can get you back in time. We can have some discussion.
So there is a showdown.
There is, and that's really valuable. It's a really important
And
lesson. It's up to you.
and Joanna finally acts out what she needs to do in order to get away from this museum of pain, how to end it all. And she ultimately brings her ego into herself, and they merge together as one. And then Joanna says, you are welcome here, but I am in charge. And then Sylvia says, I will leave now. And Joanna says, you promised me you wouldn't. I never have, and I never will. And they too, she absorbs her into herself to be with her always. And then I won't read the last chapter here. Something really charming and wonderful happens. But I will read this last little bit. She has been home now for 3 weeks. I've already scheduled a 2-hour meeting with my boss at Google. I will tell him everything and he will know it is not a joke, for he knows that yes, I am weird, but I am honest. I will ask him to send the message up the line to his boss and up and up and up. And they must tell all the influencers, and the influencers must tell their followers, and the followers must tell their followers and their friends and their families and the children, especially the children. They will all use different words and their stories may not be mine. But the message is all the wars must stop, and we can do it. There is a map. We are stuck in the belly of the third, in my will over your will, and we are suffering. We must rise into the fourth, into the heart where love lives, where your good is my good, and we will rejoice. All of us will rejoice. I will sleep well tonight. The message I was commissioned to bring to you has been delivered. And just before I awoke this morning, I had the most awesome dream about a lion and a lamb.
Questions, thoughts?
One thing I want to say is, I feel like it was just like slid right over, but your description of the fourth kingdom, like the part, was amazing. Like that should be on a silver easel.
That's so
I
like.
I want to go back and read.
We want to live there, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
And theoretically, and we can, if we're sufficiently enlightened. I will never be entirely that enlightened. I have visited there. You have all visited there. We spend a lot of time there. Let us not cut ourselves down. Do not sell yourself short. Everybody here spends a lot of time in the fourth. Anything we do, anything we say that comes from generosity, that comes from love, that comes from caring, is us living in the fourth. And then we will bump down into the third when something rough happens. And I think, ugh, I can't stand it. And that evaporates all of the good stuff. But the point is, to me, that the goodness, even the greatness of this map and the way that I have expressed it is that we can see where we are and we can see where we need to go. And we can see how to get there. And when we are stuck in the third, no matter if it's not our fault, it was totally the other person's fault, but I am now stuck in the third. We have the responsibility and we have the ability to say, okay, there's only a few inches between the abdomen, where it's my will over yours, or the heart, where God lives, where I want to live, where love lives. And I just have to ask the question to get up here, what would love do now? And the answer may not always be, let them have their way. I don't know. You know, parents have to very often say, no, you may not do it that way. No, you can't. And even in a marriage, you know, there has to be limits. But if they can be done with the energy of the heart, rather than the energy of the abdomen, then I think it still counts.
I'm gonna go through and look at my museum of
Oh boy, we all have a museum of pain. And don't we love, you know, I go to bed at night sometimes and before I can do anything else, I have to remember 10 years ago when so-and-so did such and such. And and when my son did this, and when I did that stupid thing, you know, some of my little stupidities just knocked me over. And but that's not what wants to happen here.
It occurs to me that it's so crucial that the taking your ego self and just radically accepting it. And for me, that process also feels like taking your museum of pain and looking past it, because until we look past it, it's in the way and we can't see or hear what love would have us do now. And so it's a matter of like putting that aside or looking over it to what love is actually calling us to do.
Yeah.
And it occurs to me too that even those who would say they are citizens of the fourth, they're not immune from getting tricked into perhaps something going under the radar and getting them in a in a fit of some kind. Happens to people.
Absolutely. And I think all of us, while we are mortal, we will be susceptible to that.
Yeah.
But if we can observe it, that is really useful. Yes.
I have a question about.
Speak real loud.
I have a question about Joanna's original mission for going there, that map. and the relationship between the Israelis and Palestinians, and how her saving herself, her heart, helps, how that's related to
Well,
that conflict there.
right. And I don't spend a lot of time on that, but I have her in there. Well, because I knew somewhat about the whole situation, but because, that is one of the places in the world that has this constant conflict, and how do they solve it? And there are a few places where Joanna is successful, and surprisingly, it boils over into Amin and David, the two bellboys, the Hebrew and the Palestinian bellboy, who had been bickering, and she said, I heard them laughing. I swear on the Quran and the Bible, I heard Amin and David laughing together. Just a tiny little thing that, and I suggest here that as we do this, we radiate all this out, and it can save the world, and maybe Joanna's success in that. And I just use the two of them, David and Amin, to just show that there was suddenly a moment of peace and laughter between them.
Helen? So is that okay?
I have a question about, well, I know you're a playwright, essayist, and now this is the first work of fiction that I've heard of yours, and.
No, I've done others.
That's the first one she's heard.
Yeah, okay.
And so I noticed, I think after the playwright, early in the novel, the novella, when Joanna is arguing in her house, the narration between the dialogue, and the dialogue is extensive, it's just minimal narration. So it reminds me of a stage play. And the narration is in essentially fragments often. And for me, that creates the tension.
Oh,
Punctuated the air. And then I noticed that gentler moments later in the story, you've got full sentences and more description. I was wondering if you did that. And for me, that sort of created a calmer energy. I was wondering if you did that.
I did nothing consciously. I just said, this is what works here, and this is what I have to do now. And then this is going to work here.
So have you sold the rights for the play or the movie?
Do you want to buy them?
I could see it.
Fund me.
It's beautiful.
Just one thing, I loved in the third kingdom, it's like my will versus yours, who's going to prevail, who's the strongest or the smartest, but it occurs to me in the dialogue between Amin and David that it's, that something magical is happening when you hear people saying something like, I'll lift thee and thou lift me and we'll ascend together. That's kind of cooperation sounds like it's heading towards the fourth kingdom.
Yeah. Right. There are a lot of things that are just preparation for making this fourth kingdom be the one. As we read the newspaper, as we look around, it is not hard to convince us. Here's where we are, in general, humanity in general, with plenty of otherwise, so many international organizations set up simply for caring, for helping, for blessing. And so many, countries struggling in spite of all the crap that goes on to try to make good things happen for a lot of people. The struggle is going on between the fourth and the third constantly. But as we recognize it and give our energies for ourselves, for our country, for our churches, do we ever see the control energy in our churches?
Hardly.
Put words to that.
Not speaking of any in particular.
Carolyn, Shelley and I have been listening to this worldwide conference of collective trauma. Thomas Hubel in Israel. I listened today to one of the presenters from Palestine with Thomas. They were talking together. This Palestinian had been arrested by the Israelis at age, I think, 12 or 13, and he spent 10 years in jail. So he spent all his teenage years and for throwing rocks and getting other Palestinians to throw rocks, Israelis, things like that. And he had come to a place within prison. He said prison was not a peacemaking academy, but for whatever reasons, I came to a place to realize that the violence that I was trying to encourage, my will over others, was not the way. And so he's been up twice in the last several years for a Nobel Peace Prize. I can't remember his name offhand, but it was just touching and beautiful to hear how he had transcended those experiences. It's interesting to me, just kind of, again, Michelle, you have a thought of this. I mean, you don't touch on it directly, but there's this epigenetic generational trauma, pain that travels with us. And it's almost like a pain museum, except it goes generations back and it's in our DNA. And that takes, I think, a community effort. You kind of touch on that because you have these three in one, right? The three kind of essences of Joanna, but they have to work together. They have to experience things together. And one of the values I think that we have of meeting like this in communities meeting, whether it's religious or secular, or whatever, in real time and real space, talking about things that are important, is that can help heal, that can help us move along in this loving thing. And we have kind of a culture right now that keeps pushing us away from that. COVID pushes us away from that. You know, social media, electronics can push us away from real-time, heart-to-heart interaction. And so I would just throw that out there. These experts in trauma, they don't devalue individual therapy, but they all said, it seems like to me, almost all of them said, this collective, I mean, we all experience it together and generationally, and we all need to work together. It's kind of this tipping point. We all need to communicate and share each other's hearts and try to heal this collective trauma. Kind of point to that in the book. It's just an interesting intersection. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so a couple of big takeaways from the summit, which
Talk a little loud.
a couple of the big takeaways from all of the speakers, there were over 50 professionals, bearing witness, the power of bearing witness and the power of healing through watching someone else heal. And your story is a living, breathing entity, right? And so we were bearing witness to her, and we get to heal alongside her healing.
Yeah.
Those stories are, you know, they are the powerful living, breathing transmitters of so much information. So we did that collective healing here through your gift.
Oh, good. I hope so. Thank you.
Most also,
Yes.
That's what I said, I think.
Hey,
yes,
she has to go.
she does. Thank you.
Tomorrow,
Yes,
she has a big day tomorrow.
she has a very big day. Thank you.
Oh, I have a big day tomorrow, but anybody who wants to purchase the book, I have plenty of time to sign them.
Mhm.
So
We're gonna, thank you, Carolyn. We're gonna close out with a little different way. Usually we do a hymn, but last Faith Again, Think Again. John Ogden presented just this wonderful spiritual chant. And Lorraine and Kristen are gonna present that for us. And you're gonna translate this, right? So they know what it means? So that they know what they're saying?
Wherever love is, charity and love is, there is God.
Beautiful,
And
thank you.
as part of the Taizé, you all know Taizé near you, there's many, many beautiful chants in that. So you can hear them at the Episcopal Church in once a month they do a Taizé service. So we sing it over and over, and then you can start harmonizing if you like.
I'm gonna hold it.
So just
Thank you so much. Will you just say what it means again?
where love, charity, and love is, there is God.
Thank you. I've asked Shelley to give us a blessing benediction before we leave.
I would like to thank all those who joined us here, both those that are seen and unseen, all the witnesses that gathered to witness us as we witness each other through this amazing, living, breathing being that we call a story. And the journey we went on as we discovered the vastness of love, as well as the particulars, and that how each of us is this tiny particular that is the tipping point. The tipping point to end all wars, beginning with any wars we have inside of us, with those in our families, our intimate communities, our friends, our larger society. Also, any wars we may feel with the earth, with the cosmos, with our ancestors, with life and with death. And that the peace that we begin to find is not just individual or collective, it becomes universal and ancestral and greater than anything we can imagine. And it all begins with a very simple question. What would love do now? And again and always, what would love do now? What would love do?
Amen.
Amen. Gorgeous show. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Ed and Kristen. Thank you, Kristen and Lorraine, for the music. And thanks for all of your participation and being here.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
for being the umbrella holder.
Would you probably take care of that? If anybody wants to.
I want to read, somebody said, I ordered your book 15 minutes ago, but I don't know if it's going to be as good without you reading it. Thank you for sharing your good thoughts. You are a gift.
So how was your journey back to Salt Lake? With your kids?
Yeah, I just don't hang out.